Kia ora and welcome to Menopause and Arthritis, the podcast where we break down the dual challenge of managing menopause and arthritis. Ko Joe Miller toko ingoa. Hi, I'm Joe Miller from Arthritis New Zealand, Mataponapona Aotearoa, and I'm here to guide you through expert insights, real stories, and practical advice to help you manage your health with confidence. A little bit about me. I'm currently training to become a psychologist, and I provide mental health support as part of our Arthritis Assist services. With an interest in women's health and aging, and having gone through menopause myself, I'm passionate about increasing awareness and helping women manage this stage of life, especially with arthritis. Each episode will chat with subject matter experts, health professionals and advocates to uncover what's really going on with your joints, hormones and overall well-being. Whether you're navigating symptoms yourself or supporting a loved one, this is the place to get the knowledge and support you need. So let's get started, because understanding your body is the first step to feeling your best.
Okay, so today our podcast guest is Lara Briden. Lara is a naturopathic doctor and a best-selling author of several books. She also has almost 30 years of experience in women's health and sees patients in Christchurch, where she treats women with PCOS, PMS, endometriosis, perimenopause, and many other hormone and period-related health problems. So kia ora and welcome, Lara. And before we start, would you like to tell us just a little bit more about yourself and explain what you do and how you work with women and really why you're so passionate about women's health?
Yeah. All right. Kia ora, Joe. Thanks for having me. It's really great to do something in New Zealand, which is my adopted home. As everyone can tell, I'm not New Zealand by birth, but apparently my Canadian accent just will never go away. Apparently, it's hardwired. Um, so yeah, I've been a naturopathic doctor trained in Canada for almost 3 decades, which has given me that great opportunity to work in person with people face to face over the decades and hear all the stories and find out what works and what doesn't work. But going way back, if you want like a tiny clip from my origin story, before I became a naturopathic doctor, I was studying evolutionary biology. I published a peer-reviewed paper in evolutionary biology. I was really interested way back in the early 90s in sex differences. So my paper was on sex differences in foraging behavior. And so almost from the beginning, I headed into general practice in naturopathic medicine, and I was, of course, seeing a lot of women because that's who comes to naturopaths largely. And I just had to learn on the ground, quickly, like what are some alternatives to the pill, alternatives to surgery. That was back in the 90s. And yeah, so that just sort of really inspired me to reframe. There was even then, or even now to some extent, there's this sort of framing that there's normal health and then there's female health, and women are somehow like, weird or the variant or broken. And it's like, I was just through my biology lens. It's like, well, clearly female is normal. Both sexes are normal, but like the female, I like to think that the female version of physiology is the standard default version, and male's the quirky variant. They are a little quirky hormonally in just all sorts of ways. So, cyclic through my lens, like having cyclic hormones is normal. And so that's part of why I've been so passionate. And also just butting up against like right in the middle of what I call the era of contraceptive drugs, like this right in the 80s and the 90s, just this like, and even now, like this standard protocol of there's anything pesky going on with the hormones, you just shut it all down with hormonal birth control. It's just like whatever whatever the problem is, hormonal birth control is the solution. And obviously I don't agree with that. And so I've spent a few decades finding alternatives for women in my practice, in my patients, and then also through my books.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that you come from that really strong science background as well,
Yeah.
Laura, which I think is really important in this space. And I think, yeah, that definitely that take, around, how we manage women's health is so important.
Hmm.
What I'd like to do now is just really move on to talking a little bit about perimenopause
Yes.
and autoimmune arthritis, because I
Yes.
know you've had some experiences of this in your practice. And I guess full disclosure here, I've been doing some research on how women navigate perimenopause with rheumatoid arthritis for my master's thesis. And I've discovered that this intersection is really significant, because something like rheumatoid arthritis is most commonly diagnosed around the same age as perimenopause, so that sort of
Mhm.
40 to 50-year-old age bracket. And also that it affects women 3 times more often than men. So it'd be really great, I think, if we could just start by explaining that difference between perimenopause and menopause. And then I guess why we're seeing this noticeable rise in anxiety or even fear around perimenopause. And, why do you think, so many women are feeling scared or overwhelmed about this life stage today?
There's lots to discuss there, Joe. So
And
there's
I think
lots
I've opened
there.
a can of worms.
Let's actually start with just autoimmunity as a broader topic. I mean, of course, our rheumatoid arthritis is a very specific autoimmune disease.
Yeah,
It's in some ways it's quite specific. It's a little different than some of the others, but more broadly, of course, as I'm sure many of your listeners know, women we're more prone to autoimmune generally, just full stop, almost without it. There's a couple of conditions that affect men more, but almost everything else is women. So that would be Hashimoto's, Sjogren's would be another kind of quite common. I'm listing ones now that commonly flare during perimenopause. So
yeah,
rheumatoid arthritis is not unique in that regard. And also, I would invite people to think about where a lot of this might make sense if people realize that a lot of those same conditions, certainly autoimmune thyroid disease, rheumatoid arthritis, the other time they can flare is postpartum. So
yeah.
this is actually there's quite a parallel there. And in my latest book, my third metabolism book, I talk a lot about how, well, in the first chapter, I kind of lay out one of the things about female physiology, and again, I would characterize this as normal, not broken, but it has all different modes, like shifting gears all through your life. I mean, obviously we have, childhood, then we have puberty, men do that too. But then you've got like the different phases of the menstrual cycle, metabolism and immune function. Everything's like shifting gears through all of that. And then you've got like pregnancy, it's like major shifting gears, and then postpartum, and it's like, okay, and then perimenopause. So this perimenopause is just one more, like we're used to kind of all the systems in the body, the immune system and metabolism and the nervous system, big time, have to have this resilience to sort of change modes. You know what I mean by shift gears? It's like every one of those things I've talked about is your body's just doing things differently. And so in my perimenopause book, Hormone Repair Manual, I talk about perimenopause as a recalibration of every system. I'd say in standard, even just standard perimenopause where there's no overlay of autoimmune disease, the systems that recalibrate in order of sort of priority from like most distressing would be nervous system first. So nervous system's recalibrating. That includes, thermoregulatory and like the parts of the brain that control temperature, but way beyond that, sleep, all the things, circadian rhythm recalibrates. And then metabolism recalibrates in a big way, which is partly why women get, experience changes in body shape. And then in everyone, the immune system recalibrates. So that's standard. That's not unique to autoimmune. The immune system is recalibrating. And that's why you get women getting like what I call perimenopausal allergies. The immune system just suddenly starts doing funny things. You're getting histamine reactions. Classically, if there's already like a genetic or other underlying vulnerability to autoimmune, it can flare. So similar to how it can postpartum. So that would be Hashimoto's typically flares in women's 40s, and Sjogren's I mentioned, and lupus to some extent. These are all ones that can have arthritis symptoms as well, and rheumatoid arthritis can as well. So I mean, I've had patients who were like pretty stable during some of their phases of life, but then maybe a little first signs of rheumatoid arthritis flaring up postpartum, and then it kind of went quiet, or maybe with a bit of, course of medication, then went quiet and then comes back in 40s. And that's just, I think to understand it as a recalibration, and just the immune system has to almost kind of do backflips. It's like, okay, let's do everything differently now. A big part of it is losing progesterone. So if you'll permit me, and I'll just kind of move straight into your other part of your question, like what's the difference
Yeah.
between perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to explain this as carefully as possible. So words matter quite a lot, and there's a problem with the words in this space that is generating a lot of confusion. So the problem is that the word menopause currently is used, depending on who you're talking to, is used both for the perimenopausal transition, like up to 8 years before the final period. That's sometimes called the menopause. That's just the menopause transition. And also it's used for postmenopause. So menopause, like epidemiologists, when there is a stat out there, people might have heard, it's like in the year 2025, I mean, this stat is from a few years ago, there will be 1 billion women in menopause is the stat. That means postmenopause. That means like women in their like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, like all the decades, that doesn't mean, that's not the same as them being in the throes of the recalibration. Because after the recalibration, even without hormone therapy, I'll just point out lots of things settle down. They find their new, it's like in my book, I talk about it like a computer software update. So things are changing, and it can be things can get a little hectic or a little scary during the during the update. But then depending on how it's all gone, a lot of women find a new steady state, and the nervous there, so that means what the research shows is a lot of women post menopause, which is sometimes called menopause, are really good in terms of their nervous system, their metabolism will stabilize, even their immune system. That's not to say, I mean, some women can, during that recalibration, it's also, and this is really clear in the research, can be a tipping point. So for all those systems, nervous system, immune system, metabolic system, unfortunately, depending on how the recalibration goes, and it's not always something someone does wrong. I mean, it could just be all various risk factors that we face. Some women kind of wobble and then potentially go down a bad path. So that would be maybe the unlucky people. And there's probably some listening to us today who maybe did get a rheumatoid arthritis flare during the recalibration and just kind of went down the path to rheumatoid arthritis and, without sort of pulling out of the autoimmune flare. So, yeah. So, I guess, yeah, so back to the words.
Yeah.
The reason it matters so much is hormonally, the early years of perimenopause are almost the opposite, hormonally speaking, to postmenopause. It's that different. So the fact that they're mistakenly conflated into one word, do you see what I'm getting? Like, so what I just would invite people, whenever they're hearing, information or stats about menopause in air quotes, the immediate question would be, okay, wait, are we talking about perimenopause here or postmenopause? Like just to understand, because they're so different. And the big difference is during, especially the early years of perimenopause, estrogen is higher than normal. It's spiking up higher than normal. It's still doing its normal up and down every month. And just for context, every month in a healthy menstrual cycle in young women, estrogen drops to menopausal levels every month. That's totally normal. In fact, in perimenopausal women, it doesn't drop as low as it used to, but it's spiking up higher. So there's this exposure to higher than normal estrogen, which is unfortunately, just to add to the complexity, is potentially can drive autoimmune conditions. And I think that's part of why we see the flare. And then there can be sort of a lag time, because we know with rheumatoid arthritis, but the actual disease process, the biomarkers can kind of be there like a few years before the symptoms really hit. So we have to factor in sort of a lag time, but the disease process itself might have flared during these high estrogen phases. But the other thing that's happening at the same time is progesterone. So anyone who knows my work will know I've been, singing for, I'm not the only one doing this, but like for progesterone to come into the conversation. And from an autoimmune perspective, it's very relevant because progesterone is a straight up immune modulator, like calms autoimmune disease. So straight up, estrogen's more complicated. Like estrogen has some anti-inflammatory, some inflammatory, some autoimmune promoting. Estrogen's sort of a lot more nuanced, but progesterone is pretty much dials down autoimmune disease, and which is a big part of the postpartum. So when you go from astronomical levels of progesterone during a pregnancy to none basically during postpartum. That's mechanistically, that's part of probably why it's one of the reasons that autoimmune flares then, and it's similar in peri. So the main thing with perimenopause, estrogen starts going up and down very dramatically, which feels from a nervous system perspective also can feel really bad. And then progesterone is just quietly, as I say in my book, leaving the scene. It's like, bye-bye. Like, sort of like that's all she wrote. That's like sort of like, they're the actors in the play to just exit first. And so there is a lot more, even in the last couple of years, I'm just amazed. Actually, there's a lot more awareness about how body identical progesterone, which in New Zealand is eutrogestin, can provide benefits. I would say I would just speculate. I would just sort of say if women have in their 40s, still, again, this is like still having periods, if they've started on so-called HRT and noticed an improvement potentially in some of the autoimmune, it would likely be from the eutrogestin part of it. But not everyone gets you know what I mean? So not everyone gets the eutrogestin part. We're still in this transition phase where like most of the modern guidelines are saying this body identical progesterone is better than the old school progestins. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Should I explain that a bit more? Or
No, I
yeah,
think for our listeners that might be quite good. I mean, I
yeah,
understand, but I think, they probably don't.
yeah. So for quite a long time. So okay, so Mr. back to, I just want to make sure this is clear.
Yeah.
So um it's actually estrogen, what's called body identical, or like the bioidentical, taking the molecule, the hormonal molecule that is exactly identical to the body's own hormone, has been the case for a while for testosterone and estradiol, our main estrogen. Although certainly there were some non-body identical estrogens around back in the 90s, but it's sort of definitely sort of much more common for women in menopause to get a so-called AKA natural estrogen. But progesterone I mean, I've written about this multiple times. I have a blog post called How Science Got It Wrong about progesterone. Like there's just a whole sequence of just like mishaps and mistakes of like, it was like a comedy of errors of like how progesterone just kind of got forgotten. And then also not only forgotten, but just like this insistence, this kind of blind insistence for decades that, oh no, progestins are the same. The progestins in hormonal birth control, there's no difference. They're really not the same. Like especially from an autoimmune perspective and nervous system perspective, the progestins, and that would be anything in hormonal birth control, that would be the classic progestins used in HRT more traditionally. In lots of ways, when it comes to the nervous system and the immune system, they can have opposite effects to body identical progesterone. And so this has kind of been like, this is my career in women's health actually in the 90s started. I mean, just again, for a bit of backstory. I mean, when I first was on the ground, I was helping women of all ages, but like the women at that time were on old school HRT, like the really, like not body identical anything. And so my first work was just actually changing, like just getting them off, like getting them onto what used to be called bioidentical, and I remember thinking at the time back in the 90s, it can only in a few years this is all going to be clear that in the science that these are much safer, and it took like 25 years. So I mean, the consensus is now that body identical progesterone is much safer for the breasts, but it's also just much nicer for lots of things. So yeah. So, I mean, people listening, if they're on a type of HRT, check. I mean, I'd say at least 1 in 2 of you listening will probably already be on, it's called eutrogestin in New Zealand. It's much more common now. But if you're not, I guess that would be in my perimenopause book, I say, especially if you're taking hormone therapy and not feeling great and wanting to troubleshoot that, the very first step is it real progesterone or not? And in most cases, like the doctor's happy to change it because it's, like I said, it's sort of the main modern guidelines recommend eutrogestin or similar now.
So is that a solution for autoimmune arthritis? Is it, or I mean, is it,
right?
I mean,
Okay, so
that's the big question, the big elephant in the room, isn't it?
Okay. So, by solution is a heavy term. I mean, I know. Like it's never going to be a standalone solution. I mean, certainly, I mean, it's lots going on with rheumatoid arthritis, and people, may still need their medication. So no, I'm not saying it's a fix.
And plus,
But
the
I'm
research
saying,
is still,
yeah, there's not that much research. But I
no,
mean, I was just actually reviewing some of the research ahead of today, trying to get my head around it.
yeah,
My understanding currently, and I might have missed something, but like my current read is there's no evidence that any type of hormone therapy can modify the disease in a meaningful way. It can relieve symptoms potentially. I mean,
yes,
any of the research that's been done around estrogen and rheumatoid arthritis that I could see, it's all about how estrogen improves bone density,
yes,
which is important because women with RA are more at risk of bone loss, but it's not improving the disease process. Although estrogen therapy does reduce pain generally, reduces central pain
yeah,
sensitization.
which is
So,
good. Yeah,
I mean, women might feel a bit better on estrogen, but there's no evidence yet that it modifies any actually osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, the disease process itself. Um, I think and neither for progesterone. I mean, it certainly hasn't been clinically trialed for rheumatoid arthritis, to my knowledge. But I mean, just mechanistically, biologically, through my lens anyway, um, of the two hormones, actually progesterone's the one more likely to actually dial down the autoimmunity to some extent. But again, not as a standalone solution. Does
yeah.
that kind of fit
Yeah,
with your,
that does. And
yeah.
I guess my question with that around that is as well, should you be doing the estrogen with the progesterone, or could you just do the progesterone?
You could just do the progesterone. So,
Yeah,
yeah, so we've got, I think how this came about. So, yeah, I would like to try to explain this because I get this a lot because people have heard, especially in the postmenopause state, if you have a
yes,
uterus, you cannot take estrogen alone without progesterone.
yes,
But it's not a it's not a parallel situation. Like progesterone can actually at any life phase can be used on its own without estrogen. It's safe to do so because it's not the only reason estrogen has this stimulating effect on the uterine lining that needs addressing.
yeah,
Progesterone doesn't do that. It's the thing that prevents the thickening of the uterine lining and actually potentially reduces the risk of breast cancer. And so progesterone is, and again, I'm talking about body identical progesterone, not no, I
yeah,
mean,
that's really important.
in
Yes,
terms of, I guess, mainly that comment about breast cancer, because all progestins, this is an example of the difference actually, all progestins slightly
yeah,
increase the risk of breast cancer, whereas, and again, it's not a lot of evidence, but mechanistically and through several lines of evidence, it's quite likely that progesterone reduces the risk. So that's one of the differences. That's actually one of the reasons it's considered safer. Um, but back to, can you use progesterone on your own? On its own, absolutely. I mean, just as you would use, if you just think about it, I mean,
yeah,
progestins are
yeah,
used on their own, like the
yeah,
hormonal IUD, that's a progestin, the implants, the people sometimes take a progestin only pill to lighten flow. So really for any of the kind of symptoms that progestins are prescribed to try to control, progesterone can also work
yeah,
to some extent. It's not as strong. It has differences, obviously, but it, yeah. So just from that logic, right? So especially
yeah,
during the years of when estrogen's higher than normal, just to say again, in the early years of perimenopause,
yes,
then progesterone alone is the most obvious
yeah,
treatment. So, and I just did a social media post about testing. So I would just say to people, testing estrogen and progesterone, trying to test estrogen and progesterone is of limited use because it can be rather a frustrating, futile exercise. So the really clear way to know that estrogen is high, it's not rocket science. It's like if the periods are close together and heavy and heavier than normal, there's a lot of estrogen around. Like there's no other
yeah,
possible explanation for that. When estrogen is low later in perimenopause will be when the periods are like that phase of perimenopause when you're getting closer to your final period. When you might get like 3 months without a period. Your estrogen's quite low during those, 10 weeks or something, waiting for your ovaries to kick into action again. So yeah, you'll legitimately go through some times of
yeah,
what can feel quite low. So I mean, that's just giving a teaser for when. I mean, because my readers and people are always asking me, like, if you start with progesterone and feel great, and then when do you bring in estrogen therapy? And there's
yeah,
different times and reasons. And I mean, you can even just use it. People talk to their doctor, obviously. Don't just go based on what I'm saying. Like take these to your doctor. But like you could, a lot of women sometimes just use it just during the premenstrual drop, like just this 5 or 6 days leading up to the period when estrogen's collapsing. That can sort of shelter. Yeah. So that's in a nutshell.
No, no, I think that's so interesting because I think so often, it's when we're not told about that stuff. We're
Mhm.
just kind of told this is the solution, this is what you need, this is going to help, and it's just not clear kind of what's doing what.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that is so valuable, the sense of okay, the estrogen, the progesterone, and what works where, and where that might be relevant for both, the perimenopause and also, I guess, the autoimmune arthritis symptoms as well.
Yeah. I'll just say another, just that this, well, I'm thinking of it, another hormone that set of hormones that helps to modulate in a good way autoimmunity,
Yeah.
especially rheumatoid arthritis,
Mm.
are the androgens, right? So this is people might be hearing about testosterone. I would also
Yeah.
put DHEA in that. Now, DHEA is now fully in the territory of kind of an alternative solution. I'm not necessarily, people aren't going to get a prescription for that from their doctor necessarily, but I'm just putting it out there as for people who are interested in that sort of deeper level, like the androgens. By androgens, I mean male type hormones, so testosterone, DHEA.
Yeah.
They generally reduce autoimmunity. Full stop. Like this is part of why men are less prone.
Yeah.
It's only part. There's actually probably three main reasons. Well, there's different reasons I think why women are so much more prone to autoimmune disease. One is lower level of androgens, higher estrogen, which potentially drives autoimmunity, and also there's this whole thing about the having two X chromosomes, which is actually a major health benefit.
Yeah.
So across the board, biologists are like, wow, yeah, if you're going to be for mammals, having female is definitely better. Having two X chromosomes is definitely better. But there's this whole thing where the second, I don't, this is my science brain now, but the second X chromosome is supposed to be largely kind of bundled up and silenced. And if that process has not fully happened, it starts kind of expressing, and that seems to be part of what drives autoimmunity in women. And yeah, and it's always, just to say again, it's always a genetic component. I mean, this is when I'm doing a
Yes.
clinical intake with my patients, I'm always asking them,
Yes.
do what like what's in your family history, but most specifically, I mentioned like which auto like who had autoimmune disease, because that will tell a story of what.
Yes.
And a common thing that I'll see clinically, and again, I realize most people listening actually have rheumatoid arthritis or a fully, developed autoimmune disease, but there's a lot of women out there with kind of just an autoimmune, what I call chatter. Like they'll
Yeah.
just be like, they start getting aches and pains, and then you look, and they've got like some high auto antibodies of different types, and they're not in a full disease state yet, which is great, but there's definitely like the immune system. I say to them, your immune system is not happy. It's like
Yeah.
then that would be a good opportunity for anyone listening who's maybe still at that earlier phase or knows someone who might be.
Yeah.
That's a great time actually to do all the natural kind of immune modulating things, which through my lens for a woman in her 40s would potentially include body identical or natural progesterone, but also, diet changes and fixing the gut and probiotics and like, selenium, and these are all the things.
Yeah.
They aren't complicated, or a lot of the autoimmune like natural protocols are pretty straightforward.
Yeah, which is a lot of what we're
Yeah.
proactive about it
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
Arthritis New Zealand as well. And so yeah, just I guess just back to those symptoms as well, because I think women, as you said, they're quite often it's their autoimmunity, it's immunity that's being
Yeah.
affected.
Yeah.
And so it's that, and this came up in my research, it's that how do you differentiate between those symptoms? Because which ones are perimenopausal, which ones are autoimmunity, how do you make sense of that? And because I think quite often the clinicians struggle with that as well.
I think the framework, I'm just formulating this into, even as I'm talking to you, I'm like, I should write
Yeah.
something about this. So,
Yeah. I'd love you to.
yeah. So the framework that might help is, this is true across the board, not just with autoimmunity.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that's going on with your health, simmering kind of under the surface,
Yeah.
is what's potentially going to flare or worsen during the recalibration of perimenopause. So like it's an amplification. It's like a dialing up. So I mean, in my period book, I talk about the period is the monthly report card, as in it's like a little monthly check-in. It's like, oh, how am I doing in terms of my general health? Because if my general health is not good, then, the ovulation might be late, or there might be period pain, or it's obviously not always quite that straightforward, but it's a good analogy,
Yeah.
roughly. So then in my perimenopause book, I said, so if the period is a monthly report card, then perimenopause is like your final exam. It's like the stakes are higher, like whatever. And so this is true for women with if nervous system or mental health or neurodivergence or like whatever's, if it's something in their brain that's their kind of primary thing, that will flare. If it's
Yeah.
insulin resistance or kind of metabolic things, sort of that will. So it's like, and this is why it's important. Perimenopause itself is not a medical condition, right? It's like puberty.
Yes.
So, and puberty's well, it's a perfect analogy because it's well, not exactly the same. It's in reverse, right? But like if kids, this is true actually. So kids, mental health and to some extent autoimmune can flare at puberty. It's the recalibration of every system. And so if you get like an onset of something at puberty, you don't think puberty is a medical condition. Like, right? So perimenopause is not a medical condition. So there's no point in saying, oh, like, I need treatment for perimenopause. It's like, well, no, like what is it that perimenopause has revealed or unmasked, or what is, flaring up for you
Yeah.
during peri? And then treat the underlying thing. And in some cases, yeah, maybe also use some hormone therapy to modulate that thing so that it can, in this case, arthritis, so it can sort of
Yes.
hopefully the flare can calm down again as you transition into the steady state postmenopause. Postmenopause, a lot of women love postmenopause. I'll just say, I talked about the shifting gears. It's nonstop when we're young. It's like, okay, puberty, and then in my perimenopause book, I talk about 9-year-old girls and how like just, it's great. It's like for a lot of us, I certainly remember being 9 and 10, loved it. And then,
Oh,
puberty
chaos.
kicks in and something does change. And then it's kind of nonstop from like, then it's like puberty. And it's like, okay, then you got the phases of the menstrual cycle, maybe on and off hormonal birth control too, which is also quite disruptive. Then, okay, pregnancy and then postpartum is like it's exhausting. It's like these multiple different phases. It's beautiful as well, like to make these great hormones and to maybe make babies. But then and this is why in cultures around the world, women are really happy about postmenopause. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's like we spent a lifetime shifting gears through all these modes, and now we're in steady state. And potentially it's a 30 to 40 year steady state. And I mean, yeah, some women really love it. And I mean, I'm postmenopause now myself. I
Yeah.
think it's pretty
I'm the
great.
same. And I would absolutely vouch for that. I would say, yeah,
Yeah,
it's, you get through that time and you go, wow, you feel
yeah,
empowered, you know yourself,
yeah,
you level, it feels leveled out.
yeah.
That's the right way to say things. Yeah.
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 And would you say that's true? I mean, I think that's probably true for, our topic today, arthritis symptoms often. I mean, the trajectory will differ depending on the individual, and there's different factors, but often it will stabilize. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it's sort of I guess how we navigate through that stage before it, which is the tricky one.
Yes.
And yeah,
Can
and
I,
I love that. I really like that analogy of perimenopause is not a medical condition because I think
no.
the trouble is so many women they get that in their head and they go that's what it's all about and they go I need treatment.
Okay. So can I speak to, because you asked me 20
Mm,
minutes ago about, why are many women
mm,
feeling afraid? Um, well, it's in large part because at the moment, depending on who you talk to. And it's always a mix of people and there's different opinions and
really.
there's lots of people saying just very wise, great things. So this is not a blanket statement to anyone, but like there is quite a prominent narrative, which I do want to call out, if you will, because it
Yeah.
upsets me quite a lot as an evolutionary biologist. There's this narrative that menopause itself, including peri, is a deficiency state, like analogous to like thyroid deficiency or something, or like type 1 diabetes insulin deficiency, like that it's a medical deficiency that needs to be corrected. And that has been put forward for different reasons. I think part of it was sort of just as an attempt to put some weight behind getting women to, like, there has been sort of a sense, and I don't discount it, but like, maybe we had a couple generations since the Women's Health Initiative study where women were afraid to take hormone therapy and probably could have benefited from it. So now we need to catch up and get as many women aware as possible that they might benefit from it. So we're going to really drive that home. We're going to like talk about how they're deficient without the thing is, though, that is completely inaccurate from a scientific perspective, like from a biology perspective. And I have a beautiful, it's actually a few years old now, but there's a paper about, I didn't write it, but there's a paper about menopause through the lens of evolutionary biology, just very much explaining like what I've just talked about. Like perimenopause is a recalibration, but then you enter this post-menopause state, which is humans are meant to do. We didn't all used to die by 45. That is incorrect. Like, I just can't emphasize that enough. There many people used to die young, including 1 in 2 children never used to make it past the age of 5. That's true until just like 150 years ago. So that skewed the numbers. But for those individuals who were lucky enough to get through, they were living to 70. I don't know if there were people living to like 90 that often in the ancient times, but historical times, but definitely we know from the fossil record, from historical evidence, not unheard of for people to live into their 70s. And in fact, there's a beautiful book called, which I always quote her, I've probably helped her sell some books. It's called The Slow Moon Climbs. It's quite a dense book, but a lot of it's about evolutionary biology, which is why I loved it so much. But she builds the case through all these lines of evidence that a longer human lifespan for both men and women evolved or was selected for specifically because women in their post-reproductive years are so beneficial to the family group. Like if you have those 50, 60, 70-year-old women around, everyone in the group, including some of the adult males, are more likely to survive. Basically, it's like they're just holding it all together. Yeah. They're just like keeping it all going. And when you read it, I mean, it's in the evidence. I mean, it's in the science. But also when you hear that, at least to me, when I say it or hear it being said, that's true. Like it's true, right? Like that the women, because we just know women around us, like at that age, are just quietly getting things done. and like, where would we be without them? So that's been true for humans for a long time. Yeah. So to suggest, this is why I get so animated about this particular narrative. Like it is just not true that that menopause is now an accident of living too long. That is not what the science shows at all. And so all that said, it doesn't mean you can't take hormone therapy. I mean, some women, it doesn't mean that hormone therapy might not be helpful in those postmenopausal years. I'm not saying that at all. Yeah. I'm just saying it's not a disease to be fixed. Yeah. And I think when you ask me, like, where is the fear coming from? It's that narrative. And I would like that narrative to just quietly be put to bed. And like, I just did a social media post about like, we don't need that narrative. Like if the benefits of hormone therapy are real, and I think they are, just say what they are. Like, we don't have to wrap it up in this, like it's just because it's not accurate and it's generating a lot of fear. And also, I've spoken to a number of clinicians. We're in this phase, and here we are. I'll just put a time stamp on this. December 2025. This is really only a couple of years that this has been at this pitch. It's gonna. I time stamped it because the pendulum's going to swing, and I think it's going to calm down. Yeah. But many of my fellow clinicians will agree. Like, we'll get like women. Even 2 years ago, women in their 40s would come and just describe what's happening. I'm tired, I've got heavy periods, and you sort of troubleshoot, try to figure out what that is. Mm-hmm. Now, the first thing is, I've got perimenopause. I need something for perimenopause. And then you have to actually probe, so you've got joint pain, or you've got not sleeping, or like try to figure out what it is. But like in the midst of all of this, it's a very simple example. Iron deficiency, this is not joint pain related now, but like iron deficiency causes brain fog, sleeplessness, anxiety, and a classic symptom of perimenopause is super heavy periods, like absolutely crazy heavy periods for some women. And in some case studies that I've got in mind, that's been missed. Like they're just like, oh, I've got this brain fog. I must need estrogen. It's like, or test your iron and like, let's start with some, getting your iron levels back up, getting your periods lightened.
Yeah.
And first, because that is probably going to deliver more benefits. So this is what I mean Peri's having a moment, perimenopause is having a moment, which is both good.
Which is good and bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we're just sort of running out a little bit out of time here. So I guess from this, for our listeners, it'd be great just even what could be a key takeaway for them. Somebody who's got some, possible autoimmune arthritis, going through perimenopause, how should they approach the health system?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll just try to be quite concrete, I guess. Yeah, like some takeaways.
Or just a couple of takeaways that.
Yeah. So the first takeaway is that it's a dangerous time. It's a recalibration.
Yeah.
If you feel like your autoimmune is flaring, it probably is. I mean, obviously get some biomarkers tested and sort of get that looked. And keep in mind that if your biomarkers are high, some of your autoantibodies are high, that could translate into worse symptoms in a few years. So you really do want to not just ignore it.
Yeah, particularly because of that lag as well.
Yeah, because of the lag. So, I mean, that might mean, medication, which is sort of a little, beyond my scope a little bit. But in addition, it could mean progesterone, Eutrogestin straight up. I mean, especially if there's also heavy periods and sleep problems. And I mean, people can, like I said, talk to your doctor, there's lots of information now out there about how progesterone can be used and it can help with some of those things. And we won't have time to go into it, but I'll acknowledge for those people listening who have had a negative mood reaction to progesterone, I will just say most women feel great on it, but I acknowledge I wrote a blog post, an article called Troubleshooting Progesterone, so they can check that out.
We'll put some links. And
just keep in mind progestins, which might be helpful for heavy periods, like the hormonal IUD or something. They're not bad per se, but they're not going to give the immune modulating benefits of progesterone. They're not the same.
Yeah.
And you can, for what it's worth, you can use a hormonal IUD and Eutrogestin on top of it. For the Eutrogestin more for like sleep and mood and immune function. And then also I would say perimenopause is also a time, especially if you feel like something's flaring. All the diet. And it sounds like in your organization you offer some. I mean, I'm a naturopath, so I'm probably in the, I'm in the wheat-free, dairy-free camp. Fix your gut, probiotics, selenium. I would give I give a plug for selenium just because our soils in New Zealand are low and it's an immune modulator. And obviously take it safely and talk to your clinician, but things like that, this would be a good time. I mean, I think another takeaway, just in closing, this is true for not just autoimmune arthritis, but anything happening in women's 40s. Now is the time. Now is the time to dedicate some resources and time and energy to try to stabilize that situation, because it's what I said earlier, it's a recalibration, it's a tipping point. And to be blunt, and again, it's not always people's fault, but if you go off the rails too much in your 40s in perimenopause, that has potentially put you on a bad trajectory for decades. So, not to be a downer, but this is why it's just worth it. Like if people can, I was like say to my patients, now is the time. Like do not wait, whatever it is you need to do. And sometimes for people, some of my patients, I hesitate to say it, but sometimes it means working less or just clearing the decks, clearing some space. I've had conversation, and I did the same myself. I just if you can afford it, I know not everyone can, but if you can find a way to sort of carve out some more space for yourself and rest and the right kind of movement and whatever it is you need, and preparing food and all those things, a way to think about it, even from a financial perspective, if you do that now, you likely be able to go back to work and maybe able to work for longer. Is that making sense?
It makes perfect sense that actually you're speaking to my narrative. So
because if you
completely get it,
if you totally burn, if you push and push and push and go over the cliff, you might not get it. Like, I mean, again, I'm being a sort of a downer, but you don't want to reach the point where you can't get it back. And
There
so,
is that tipping point, and I probably
yeah,
got to that tipping point and went, "Oh my goodness, I need to recalibrate. This is not working."
yeah.
And I think so many, women, you almost don't want to get to that tipping point. You just want
No,
to,
you want to
yeah,
rein it in
yeah,
before it gets that bad. So
yeah,
now is the time.
yeah,
And if what's that quote? Like, if the best time was, a few years ago, the second best time is now. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Oh, Lara,
yeah,
I could talk to you for hours.
yeah,
Obviously, I can't, which is a shame. But it's been amazing. Thank you
yeah,
so, so much.
yeah,
Yeah, what you've been talking about has been incredibly helpful. And we'll put some links
yeah.
this podcast as well, so that people can explore some of the other great stuff. I'm now, yeah, I would just want to explore evolutionary biology. I just sort of kind of go, oh my goodness, I think I could get quite immersed in that.
We'll put the links to the paper and the book that I talked
Yeah.
about. They're
Yeah.
not. I didn't write either of them, but
Yeah,
they're good.
no, that
Yeah.
that would be fantastic. So, thank you again, Lara, and yeah, if and for our listeners, look out for further podcasts that we'll have, and we'll delve deeper into menopause and arthritis.
Yeah.